Okay, let's unpack this.
It's
We're going deep into something that, I mean, it really affects everything we see online, every political chat, you name it.
It really does.
We're talking about how we, as a society, can build a collective defense
Right.
against, well, against the weaponization of information.
Right. And this isn't just about, spotting a fake headline here or there.
No, it's bigger.
Yeah.
We're talking about building a full-on social immune system. Something that's actually robust enough to handle deep fakes, to handle sophisticated propaganda, and all these algorithms that just seem designed to tear us apart.
That's the challenge. It really is the ultimate cognitive challenge of our time. And what I think is so powerful about the sources you've pulled for this deep dive is the starting point. They start from a very mature, very crucial realization
Which is?
that we have to operate under the premise that, well, there's no perfect solution.
Right. There's no silver bullet.
Exactly. No magic fix. But, and this is the key, we absolutely cannot give up the fight.
And that framing is so important. It makes it a realistic exploration, not some search for a single answer that'll fix everything.
It becomes about building layered defenses, about layered resilience.
And the sources jump right into what is maybe the most profound insight, which is this need for what they call metacognition, radical self-awareness. It's this idea that no matter how smart you are, how well-read you are, how many times you've successfully spotted a conspiracy theory, you are still vulnerable.
That vulnerability is the key. It's everything. Metacognition in this context is just that simple, humble self-awareness of, I can be fooled too.
I could be fooled too.
Yeah. And the sources point out that, a lot of people who are really engaged in debunking misinformation can fall into this trap. They assume their knowledge, their expertise, it gives them immunity.
Like a vaccine?
Kind of, yeah. They think, I understand the mechanism of deception, so I'm protected.
But that feeling, that perceived competence, that's a vulnerability in itself, isn't it?
It is.
It makes me think of, like, an experienced sailor who assumes their skill makes them invincible to a rogue wave. They know all the risks, they know the signs, but the system of deception we're facing now, it's just so overwhelming, so personalized. Human attention alone can't keep up.
And that split second you mentioned, that immediate visceral pull, the moment between seeing something and reacting to it.
Yeah.
That is the exact window that these algorithms and, frankly, state-sponsored campaigns are engineered to exploit.
So if we skip that first step, if we don't accept our own fallibility,
Then we fundamentally misjudge the scale of the threat. We're assuming our individual smarts are enough, and they aren't.
not against what the sources call a collective frenzy.
Not even close. Individual effort, standing all on its own, is just rendered insufficient.
You know, the moment the sources really hammer home that point, the clear limits of individual effort, it feels like it shifts the whole conversation.
How so?
Kind of takes the crushing pressure off you, the individual listener. It's like you don't have to be a perfect 24/7 fact-checking machine.
Right. It's an acknowledgement that the system itself is designed to make us fail.
So our defense has to be systematic too.
It's the paradox of personal effort, really. You, as an individual, you could spend hours every week cultivating this sophisticated internal filter. You could be doing lateral reading, cross-referencing sources, deliberately seeking out counter-arguments.
Doing everything right.
Doing everything right. But the second you log onto a major social platform, all that careful hard work is immediately rendered almost negligible.
Because you're up against an infrastructure that's built for something else entirely.
It's built for engagement and polarization, not truth.
Let's dig into that mechanism. Why are we even really sophisticated thinkers so, I guess, helpless against modern algorithmic design?
It all comes down to the optimization function. Just think about the difference between, say, a search engine that's optimized for truth.
Getting you the right answer quickly.
Yes. It wants to minimize the time you spend searching. A social platform is the opposite. It's optimized for engagement, for dwell time. It's trying to maximize the time you spend scrolling and clicking.
And the easiest way to do that is emotion.
Maximum emotional reinforcement. Sometimes that's validation, but more often, it's indignation, it's anger.
So if I see a headline that makes me furious and I click on it, even if I'm only clicking to debunk it, the algorithm just learns, aha, anger works on this person.
100%. And these algorithms are working at machine speed at a global scale. They can run millions of A/B tests simultaneously across their user base.
Testing what works best.
What combination of image, emotional trigger, and headline keeps you polarized and keeps you clicking? No human being can run real-time A/B tests on their own cognitive process. It's an unfair fight.
The system has basically weaponized our own confirmation bias.
With ruthless efficiency.
So let's play that out. A really sophisticated piece of propaganda gets launched. I'm a critical thinker, I spot the lie, and I refuse to engage. I just scroll past.
Right. You've done your part.
But it doesn't matter, does it? Because the algorithm has already found 1,000 other people who are less skeptical.
And their immediate belief, their shares, their angry comments, that's what generates the traction.
And that's where the collective frenzy starts to get its own gravity.
Yes. Once a narrative or a lie or a movement hits that critical mass, once it's being shared by your friends, your family, groups you trust, the social pressure to conform becomes overwhelming.
It's not even about the truth of the claim anymore.
Not at all. It's about maintaining your social standing within your tribe, within your network.
That shifts the problem from just a cognitive failure, me getting tricked to a sociological one. Resisting that frenzy means risking social isolation.
To be labeled as one of them by your own group.
Which, for humans, is a primal fear. Our survival is so deeply tied to our sense of belonging. The threat of being cast out is a profound psychological weapon.
And that is the ultimate vulnerability that the sources identify. That pressure from a large, mobilized, angry group can make the cleverest individual feel completely helpless.
You might know the truth.
But you can't stop the social momentum of the lie. And that realization, that's what forces this logical pivot. We have to go from demanding perfect individual performance to building robust structural solutions.
We need counter-infrastructure.
We need counter-infrastructure to fight the infrastructure of polarization. Defense has to be layered. It has to be systematic.
So we're moving from just personal responsibility to shared resilience.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And that pivot you just mentioned, that move to structural solutions, it leads us right to one of the most fascinating insights in the source material. It's from classic social psychology.
The Robbers Cave experiment.
Yes, and it's such a perfect example because it just ruthlessly exposes how useless most of our feel-good attempts at resolving conflict really are.
It's a crucial lesson, and the sources were so smart to use it because it dissects the myth of simple conflict resolution.
What's the myth?
The myth is that if you just get two hostile groups to spend time together, maybe do some pleasant activities, they'll reconcile. It's often called the contact hypothesis.
Just get them in the same room.
Right. So what happened when the researchers first tried this with the two groups of boys, the Eagles and the Rattlers?
It was a disaster.
It failed spectacularly. After the researchers had already built up these strong tribal identities through competition, they tried positive contact. They had them eat together, watch movies, shoot off fireworks.
And instead of reducing hostility,
it just gave them more opportunities for insults, for name-calling, for escalating the aggression.
So a shared lunch becomes a food fight.
A massive food fight. They used every shared activity as a new platform to reinforce their us versus them boundary. Just telling them to be nice, this sort of moral education, it did absolutely nothing to stop it.
Which is pretty powerful real-world evidence that just talking to each other doesn't work if the underlying structure is still competitive.
Exactly. The researchers realized that increasing contact doesn't solve conflict. A lot of the time, it just raises the stakes.
But then they found what did work.
And that's the reality the sources highlight. The conflict only resolved when the boys were faced with a common crisis.
A situation that forced them to be interdependent.
Yes. This is where they introduced the idea of superordinate goals.
So what was the shared crisis in this study? What was the thing they both needed?
The researchers engineered a few of them, but the most famous one was the breakdown of the truck that was carrying all their food and water. So suddenly, the entire Camp Eagles and Rattlers alike was facing hunger and thirst.
And neither group could solve it alone.
No single group was strong enough to pull that heavy truck back to camp. They had to work together.
So their individual identities, being a rattler or an eagle, it suddenly becomes secondary to the shared existential goal of just getting water.
Precisely. They weren't forced to become friends. They weren't asked to apologize for stealing each other's flags or anything.
They were just forced into functional cooperation.
Yes. The sources describe it perfectly. They had to achieve a goal that was mutually beneficial, and that goal could only be accomplished through collective effort. And that cooperation, which was born out of pure necessity, it retroactively started to dissolve the hostility.
They started seeing each other as useful.
As necessary components of a successful mission, not as enemies.
This is such a profoundly important tool. It completely sidestepped the impossible task of trying to change someone's deeply held beliefs. and instead it just changes the conditions. So how do we apply that broken down truck from Robber's Cave to the intense tribalism we're seeing all over the world?
We have to consistently identify and, more importantly, amplify existential threats that require cross-border and cross-group collaboration. That is how you structurally break down the U.S. versus them boundary.
So you focus on threats where not cooperating leads to
Mutual destruction, where the common ruin is just unavoidable for everyone.
So what are some of those modern superordinate goals? What's big enough to force that kind of cooperation today?
Well, the climate crisis is the defining one.
It doesn't care about borders.
It transcends borders, political ideologies, economic systems. A conservative farmer in the American Midwest and a progressive coastal engineer in the Netherlands. They might disagree on everything else.
On the cause, on the politics.
Everything. But they both share an immediate, non-negotiable interest in infrastructure that can mitigate a flood or ensure their crops grow. They have to cooperate on the outcome of survival.
The same thing applies to global pandemics, obviously.
Absolutely. We just lived through a perfect example. A deadly, fast-spreading virus doesn't check your voter registration.
Right.
When the threat is biological, the failure to cooperate on things like vaccine distribution or data sharing, it guarantees a global catastrophe. So the incentive to cooperate becomes immediate and overwhelmingly powerful.
These crises create this sort of temporary functional shared identity.
Humanity against the threat.
The cooperative effort itself becomes the defense mechanism. It forces rivals to rely on each other.
And that's a proactive, really powerful way to build systemic resilience against the forces that are trying to polarize us.
Okay, so moving from those huge global threats, let's bring the focus a little closer to home and look at institutional watchdogs.
Right.
Because our sources make this really sobering but necessary point. You can't just rely on governments or big corporations for truth and safety.
No, in fact, they're often the source of the problem. They can be the source of systemic bias or the actual mechanisms used to spread propaganda.
Which means you need a robust external civil society.
This is a core layer of that social immune system we're talking about, the proliferation of non-governmental organizations, or NGOs.
Everything from human rights groups to environmental watchdogs.
But journalistic transparency projects, yes, it's critical because it extends that democratic principle of check and balance far beyond just the government.
It pushes accountability into the social and corporate spheres, which is where so much modern power actually sits now.
That's a great point. Power has been decentralized. It's not just in state capitals, it's in data centers. And power, wherever it is, it needs a countervailing force that operates purely in the public interest.
Something that isn't burdened by election cycles or the need to show quarterly profits.
Exactly. And this whole idea is captured perfectly by a metaphor the sources use.
The speed bumps.
The speed bumps.
It's such a simple but really effective analogy. A speed bump, it doesn't stop a car, but it forces it to slow down. So how does that apply to society?
Well, think about modern institutions, especially massive corporations in tech or resource extraction. They tend to move like these heavy freight trains, right? They're optimizing for speed, for efficiency, for profit.
A single, relentless trajectory.
Yes, and the NGO, acting as that speed bump, introduces necessary friction. It stops society from just recklessly accelerating down one single path that's being dictated by that monolithic power.
It forces the driver to look at the collateral damage. It forces them to internalize the external costs, whether that's environmental damage or the psychological harm from manipulative algorithms or suppressing dissent in some authoritarian regime.
By introducing delay and scrutiny and really a diversity of thought, NGOs ensure that the interests of marginalized people or even future generations get considered, even when that conflicts with short-term power goals.
It's the institutionalization of pluralism.
It is. It's a multitude of diverse, often conflicting voices operating outside the control of any central authority, and that diversity is, in itself, a powerful defense against unified, streamlined propaganda.
But the effectiveness of any watchdog depends entirely on its access to information. Which brings us to the core infrastructure of this layer.
Protecting whistleblowers.
Right.
Whistleblowers are the absolute lifeblood of this entire defense layer. They're the internal informants. They're the ones who can detect and report the infection from the inside.
And the sources give real-world examples. It was internal voices that exposed what was happening during the Myanmar crisis. It was insiders who revealed the algorithmic flaws inside major social media platforms.
An external audit is rarely going to uncover that level of detail. You need someone on the inside.
And these are people who are often facing immense personal and professional cost, yet they still choose to speak out. So protecting them isn't just a moral issue, is it? It's a critical piece of our security infrastructure.
It is. Because without adequate protection, that critical flow of information just stops. It dries up completely.
If every person who exposes negligence or malice is immediately crushed by litigation or character assassination or financial ruin.
And the system collapses. Protecting them means having a strong legal framework, sure, but it also means NGOs have to have the financial and legal power to provide a safety net, to be the intermediary that can protect the informant's identity and bring that information to light responsibly.
So, in essence, protecting whistleblowers ensures that powerful people can't just use silence or internal secrecy as their main defense against accountability.
Exactly. We have to see it as a necessary, continuous investment in transparency. It's the core plumbing of the whole societal defense system.
So we've gone from the global structure to societal institutions. And now we're kind of drilling down to the individual's cognitive toolkit, but approaching it structurally through education.
Right.
The sources argue that training in a skeptical attitude from a young age is one of the most urgent needs in media literacy today. We're not just teaching facts, we're teaching a way of thinking.
And that moves so far beyond the goal of simple fact-checking.
Which is always reactive.
It's always playing catch-up. You're fact-checking a deepfake after it's already been shared 10 million times. This approach is preventative. It's about instilling a fundamental cognitive attitude that sort of inoculates you against the desire to believe simplified, emotionally charged stories in the first place.
It's about recognizing the mechanism of the lie, not just the content of the lie itself. And the sources provide this fantastic, actionable framework. 3 critical questions.
Yeah, these are great.
They move beyond just, is this fake news? And they foster real critical thinking.
Let's break down that first one. It forces you to think like a media strategist. It asks, what is the intent of the person showing me this information?
That's such a profound shift in focus. You're not trying to assess the truth value of the content anymore, which could be super complex or time-consuming.
Right. Instead, you analyze the motivation of the source.
So when I see a piece of content that makes me intensely angry or that provides this perfect, immediate validation of what I already believe, that question should pop into my head.
Why?
Why is someone spending money or resources to make sure I see this? What political or financial or social outcome do they get if I believe this and share it?
Exactly. Propaganda is rarely about conveying truth. It's a means to an end. It's trying to induce a specific behavior. Vote this way, donate here, or, most commonly, hate and mobilize against that other group. Recognizing the intent reveals the manipulation.
Regardless of whether the facts are technically right or wrong.
Right. Then the second question, it tackles our technological reality head on.
The synthetic media challenge.
Yes, it asks, is it possible that this image or video has been manipulated or fabricated? This is the anti-deepfake question.
It's basically formalizing the idea that seeing is no longer believing.
A generation ago, a photo or a video felt like irrefutable proof.
The gold standard.
Today, with generative AI and sophisticated editing, they might be the most easily fabricated pieces of evidence. So this question teaches you to assume that media may be manipulated until you can prove otherwise.
You're inverting the default trust mechanism that we all have for visual evidence.
And that creates the intellectual hesitation you need to disrupt the speed of the algorithm. It encourages you to use practical tools, too, like that lateral reading we mentioned.
Right, not just digging deeper into the suspicious source, but opening new tabs and seeing what other unrelated, reliable sources are saying about the same event.
And then there's the third question, which might be the most crucial one for just maintaining emotional self-control in this environment.
This is the check on emotional hijacking.
Yes. Is my anger legitimate? Or is it being intentionally induced and manipulated?
This is the internal stop sign. We know algorithms prioritize content that causes a strong emotion, and we know anger is the most viral emotion.
So the only way to disarm that is to watch yourself react.
If the content is simple, easy to digest, and immediately makes me despise an entire group of people,
you have to engage that metacognition. You have to ask yourself, did I arrive at this intense feeling through complex reasoning and evidence, or was this feeling basically manufactured for me to drive engagement?
So media literacy isn't just about critical reading anymore. It's about cultivating this radical emotional self-awareness.
It is. And this all leads to the core philosophical defense here, the need to embrace the complexity of truth.
The sources make such a powerful point about this. Simple black and white logic. This idea that the world is neatly divided into pure good and pure evil. That's the foundation for almost all successful propaganda.
Because complexity is cognitively expensive, our brains prefer simplicity, especially when we're stressed or tired. Propaganda just capitalizes on that preference. It offers you a clean, simple story where my side is completely righteous and their side is completely evil.
It's comforting, but it's almost never true.
Real cognitive resilience requires acknowledging that truth is complex and multifaceted. The real world has shades of gray, it has competing goods, it has compromises, and good people making terrible mistakes.
So that nuanced, more three-dimensional view acts as a kind of cognitive vaccine.
It does. If a message seems too clean, too simple, too perfectly tailored to your biases, the skepticism has to kick in. You have to recognize that the simplified narrative is probably the bait. It's the bait the system is using to try and fool you.
Okay, so we've covered the individual mindset, we've covered the societal watchdogs, and these global cooperative structures. Now we get to the final layer, the formal institutional one.
The last line of defense.
Yeah, but political, legislative, judicial, and international systems. And the sources have this necessary realism about this layer, maybe even a bit of pessimism.
It's slow, it's often compromised, it's almost always reactive.
That's a crucial assessment, though.
Yeah.
We can't expect the UN or the International Criminal Court to prevent every piece of propaganda or hate speech.
No, these institutions are often just crippled by geopolitical polarization, and they can usually only respond after an atrocity has already started or, worse, has already been completed. But despite all those profound imperfections, the sources confirm that they are absolutely necessary as the final bulwark, the last resort when every other layer of the immune system has failed.
So if the NGOs are shut down, and the education system fails, and the global cooperative goals are ignored, the legal hammer still has to exist as a deterrent.
It has to.
So what's his primary role then, given that we know it's so slow?
Its main role isn't perfect prevention. It's about generating profound cost for the perpetrators. If people can commit atrocities with absolute impunity, there's simply no long-term structural deterrent at all. So these international systems exist to raise the price tag of malice, to ensure that impunity is never guaranteed.
So the key function of things like international law, sanctions, coordinated legal action, it's about accumulating precedent, creating long-term liability.
Precisely. The mechanism of deterrence works through the slow, steady accumulation of that precedent over decades. Every single time the global community manages to impose meaningful economic sanctions on a human rights abuser.
Or every time a leader is indicted by an international body.
Even if it's in absentia, yes. All of that contributes to a historical record, and that record creates a chilling effect over time.
That chilling effect establishes this long-term strategic constraint. The message becomes, those who commit atrocities, or fund genocidal campaigns, or use propaganda to destabilize nations, they will eventually face punishment or economic isolation.
Even if that punishment takes 20 years to arrive, the fact that the cost exists changes the strategic calculation for potential perpetrators today.
It turns the act from a one-time crime into a lasting political and economic liability.
Exactly. The goal is to make sure that even if they win in the short term, they've set themselves up for decades of being isolated, of potential judicial reckoning down the road. That long-term strength is why this slow, often frustrating system is so necessary.
And for any of that to work, it requires immense international collaboration.
It's the only way. If only a handful of nations enforce the cost, it's easy to bypass. You just establish trade with the non-compliant nations.
So you need that broad cooperation across all these diverse countries to maintain the pressure and ensure there's real accountability, even if the process is just fraught with tension and delay.
That slow, grinding accumulation of international solidarity is essential. It's what prevents powerful bad actors from just walking away and dissolving back into the geopolitical noise.
So even though we might have the lowest expectation for rapid success from this layer,
its necessity as the final accountability mechanism for humanity, you just can't overstate it. It represents our shared, non-negotiable standard of what is and is not acceptable conduct.
you know, this entire deep dive has felt like a necessary prescription for surviving our current information environment. It forces us to admit that just trying harder as an individual, while it's noble, is ultimately not enough.
It isn't.
So let's try to synthesize everything using that powerful metaphor from the sources.
No.
The idea that defense against hate and atrocity isn't one single perfect wall, but it's several layers of tightly packed defense mechanisms.
The Swiss cheese model of defense.
Exactly.
And it's the perfect analogy because every single layer, every slice of cheese, it has holes in it. No human system is perfect.
Right.
But when you stack them, the holes don't align. The inevitable failures of one layer are structurally caught and contained by the strengths of the layers around it.
So let's stack them. Let's review the 4 essential layers we just unpacked, moving from the inside out.
Go for it.
Okay, first, the foundation, the individual layer. That's our cognitive defense, built on metacognition and healthy skepticism. You have to know that you can be fooled. And you have to use those 3 critical questions. What's the intent? Could it be fabricated? And is this emotion mine, or is it being induced? That's your cognitive hygiene.
Then you have the next layer out.
Yeah.
The societal layer. This is that critical civil infrastructure. The NGOs and civil society groups.
A watchdog.
They're the public watchdogs, the necessary speed bumps that slow down centralized power, and they're the protectors of the whistleblowers, keeping that information flowing.
Okay, layer 3 is the structural layer. This is the active engineering of cooperation through those superordinate goals.
Right. Using shared existential crises like climate instability or a pandemic to force functional collaboration that rises above all the political and national tribalism.
And finally, the last layer, the institutional layer, law and international solidarity.
The necessary, slow, final backstop. The one that generates tangible, long-term cost and ensures accountability, providing that critical deterrent against the worst actors.
So the final synthesis really is about continuity and redundancy. Even if my individual layer fails because I'm tired and I click on something I shouldn't.
Or if the international institutions are dragging their feet because of politics.
The sheer overlap of the other layers can prevent the threat from getting all the way through.
That is the entire point. The sources conclude that this effort has to be continuous, it has to be redundant, constantly adding, reinforcing, and overlapping these defense layers. It's the only and best effort we can make.
We have to commit to stacking the cheese. Forever.
Forever. This isn't a project with a completion date. It's a perpetual commitment to maintenance and to vigilance.
And that brings us perfectly to our final provocative thought for you, the learner, to explore on your own. We've concluded that structural cooperation, when it's forced by these huge global crises, is really effective. But those global crises can feel paralyzingly large.
They can.
So take that superordinate goal principle and bring it right down to the micro level. What specific, nonpartisan, local community project could you engage in right now? A project that requires tangible, in-person collaboration from people with radically different political biases, all to achieve a shared immediate goal.
Think about something unavoidable in your town. Fixing a dangerous intersection that everyone has to use.
Or organizing flood relief after a local disaster.
Maintaining a shared community resource like a library or a park. Find that small-scale broken truck that forces political rivals to roll up their sleeves and cooperate on a shared immediate outcome.
That's where the social immune system begins its practical local training.
It is.
Absolutely fascinating. It's a deep dive into cognitive resilience and the structural engineering of our societal defense. Thank you so much for guiding us through these sources.